guys, it's Angelo, and with Antorus in full effect, we're looking at some Shadow Priest game tips for Antorus the Burning Throne. In this video, similar to my last game tips, we're going over things you should keep in mind in order to improve your DPS for each individual boss, from the Garothi Worldbreaker, which is the first boss, all the way to Argus the Unmaker, so all 11 bosses. These game tips cater to both normal and heroic difficulty, as I will elaborate on mythic tips once it becomes available next week. Now, you don't have to be familiar with the normal mode mechanics to understand what I'll be saying, but knowing little something about the fight, or rather a little something, will of course prove useful. What I also want to add beforehand is that this video will rely on ideas and aspects of the Shadow Priest that I have discussed in both the Shadow Priest rotation video and my newest Shadow Priest guide. If you haven't watched those yet, you may want to in order to gain more of an insight after this video. Good. That being said though, let's go right ahead and have a look. First off, we have the Garothi Worldbreaker, the first boss in the Burning Throne. This fight is incredibly similar to the fallen avatar in the Tomb of Sargeras, switching between single target and cleave. Try staying at far distance from the boss at all times so that you don't have to run as far when the boss casts his eradication, but try staying within range to still cast while this happens. Be sure that you're at full HP and give yourself a shield to prevent unnecessary damage from said eradication. Keeping your dots up on the Worldbreaker should prove pretty simple, but be sure to play your single target rotation to the best of your ability. Once the Worldbreaker becomes intargetable, be sure to dot up his 2 cannons before getting into Void form, that way you can have your Void Eruption damage both cannons with some heavy damage. Apart from that, move properly, help your raid soak, and this fight will be a walk in the park. The second boss, the Fel Hounds of Sargeras, are honestly not much harder than the first. Important to note for the Fel Hounds is that you will be able to maintain your dots on both bosses throughout the entirety of the fight, and upkeeping your dot management is key to high DPS on this encounter. Position yourself relatively centered of the room, this way you can either simply mouse over the 2 hounds to shoot void bolts around, or can easily target switch if you have to. The optimal time to refresh your dots, should you have to, is anywhere between 4 and 6 seconds, and to keep up your dots for the highest amount of time without having to reapply them is definitely beneficial. I suggest an active target switch every 10 to 20 seconds, perhaps even a little bit longer, maybe 25 seconds, if you're doing a good job at it. The Antoran High Command, arguably the third boss in this raid, is another great fight for us. You want to stay far away from the boss, but keep in mind that the Fel Reavers will jump towards you if you are the furthest away from your group. You only want to use Shadow Word Pain on adds that are in melee range, as anything else isn't really worth it because melees are just going to cleave them down pretty quickly. Should your Mind Seer cleave onto them, that's even better for you, so there you go. Execute them with Shadow Word Death to get some free insanity, and of course to stay in Void form for longer, and when the High Command gets close to switching the bosses out, be sure to either save your Void Eruption to once the boss is targetable, or if you're close to dropping out of Void form, just drop it and quickly ramp it back up to start off the next boss with a solid and fresh Void form. The defense of Eonar is up next, and this tower defense inspired boss is arguably the easiest one in Antorus. Shadow Priests are actually quite formidable on this boss, but the amount of movement, target switching, and dropping out of Void form will make this fight a pain playstyle wise. Dot up the big adds, including the bats, at all times, but only Mind Seer the little ones. Be sure to use Void Eruption in a timely manner once all bats have at least one of your dots on them whenever they spawn, that way you can do some heavy damage onto them. On top of this, try being fast with moving around the map, that way you can be spot on with your damage. You'll have a lot of time to move around here, so honestly that really shouldn't become a problem for you. Portal Keeper Hasabel is up next, and this is honestly a fun fight, but there is quite a bit of movement involved, as you will see in this footage. Be sure to mind sear the imps whenever Hasabel opens a transportation portal, so Shadow Word Pain on one and then just mind flay that one. And whenever you yourself have to enter one of the 3 portals in the room, be sure to use Dispersion if possible during your transition, that way you can keep your Void form up once reaching the according platform. Try using your Void Torrent in an effective manner, so only if you're not forced to move around, but don't prioritize this over staying in Void form at all costs. Staying in Void form is still more important, so if you're forced to use a Void Torrent at any point in this fight, definitely do so, and of course same goes for your Mindbender. Next up is Imonar the Soulhunter, and this is probably the fight we will struggle on the most. Being a purely single target fight with a lot of movement, and the ability to put you to sleep quite literally, you'll be dropping out of Void form constantly, and will probably not do too much damage here. If you can, use Mass Dispel to snipe away any sleep debuffs from the healers in order to proc yourself a secret, and use Dispersion in your transition phases whenever you drop low. Try not to trigger any bombs, and don't bother using Dispersion to save any Void forms here, as the walkway for each transition is much too far and most of your Void forms will fall short anyway. King Garoth, the 7th fight in this raid, is honestly a pretty good fight for us. You definitely want to position yourself in the way that you can cleave each ad and the boss at all times, so I advise staying towards the center of the room. Don't get hit by the orbs, as those will either straight up kill you in heroic or hit you so low on HP that you have no choice but to either heal yourself or get healed. Countering the incoming damage on this encounter is actually pretty important anyway, so be sure to give yourself a shield every now and then if you can. Whenever the ad phases start, immediately switch away from King Garoth onto one of the 2 ads, preferably position yourself before they even spawn. Now, Varimathras is where we get into the more interesting fights. Even though Varimathras is purely a single target fight, the long execute time and the low movement actually offer a good scenario for you to show the rest of your raid what you can actually do. If your healers can handle it, use your Dispersion whenever you have Necrotic Embrace, so that you can remain in Void form during your movement out of the group. Remember, it's 10 yards away from the group. Never be out of the raid for too long though, so after your Necrotic Embrace ends you want to run straight back, as you are only a cloth-wearing pretty squishy class after all. So refer to your regular single target rotation here again, and make effective use of your Shadow Word Death during the long execute phase of Varimathras. The Coven of Shivarra are up next, even though you can choose between doing Varimathras first or the Coven, it's completely up to you, and they are by far our best fight in this raid, DPS wise. A constant 2-target cleave encounter with various types of ads spawning, which all need to be cleaved by you, this fight offers a perfect environment for us to do what we do best, splitting our damage onto different targets. Try positioning yourself so that you can void bolt both active Shivarras at all times, and should your dots run risk of falling off, simply reapply them. Dot up any ad, especially when you can use Void Eruption, as this will do some heavy damage to all ads dotted. Be sure to either silence the Norganon ads, which are basically that wall that spawns, or use your Mind Bomb to stun them, so that you can proc your Cephas secret. Be careful though with the stun, as this could actually cause issues to your raid depending on how you are set up to CC the ads. Aggramar is up next and is definitely a very cool fight, if not one of the coolest, which is also very well designed, and another fight where we shine. You definitely want to try and use Dispersion whenever you get knocked back by Flame Rend if you're already in Void form. This way you can position yourself straight after to stay in Void form and to use a solid, full channeled Void Torrent. Only dot up the big ads unless instructed otherwise in your raid, as other DPS will most likely take care of those or CC them. Use your silence to proc to Cephas secret on the small ads, or if you can, without screwing up someone else's CC rotation, actually use the Mind Bomb on them. Overall, the fight gives great cleave conditions and gives us a very long execute. Twist of Fate can also be kept up here for quite a long time due to the sets of ads that spawn, giving you an even higher boss damage throughout all of the fight. Finally, we have the last boss in Antorus, Argus the Unmaker. Argus is definitely the best fight in this raid due to two reasons. First, it offers you a haste buff that is stackable during the first phase of the fight, which, if timed well, can be taken with you into phase 2 for around 20 seconds. Secondly, the fight switches around between single target and multi-target respectively in phase 1 and phase 2, and phase 3 grants you what is essentially both phases of the fight combined into one final showdown. In phase 1, be sure to soak the blue water orbs that spawn, which grant you Gift of the Sea. Gift of the Sea gives you 2000 haste and 2000 versatility, and if you manage to keep this buff up until the next sea orb spawns, you can actually stack this buff, granting you a consecutive 4000 haste and versatility. This effect can be stacked all the way to phase 2, which for my fight gave me a total of 5 stacks in our best try, but in the kill try gave me 4, and in most others as well. This means that you can potentially gain up to 10,000 haste, which will see you stay in void form for much longer than a regular single target encounter with movement would actually allow you. In phase 2, definitely dot up all different adds, but focus the add that takes increased shadow damage from you, and interrupt it if you can in order to trigger Cephas' secret if it casts the Constellar Beacon. In phase 3, be sure to use your potions as often as you can, should you end up dying, because you can resurrect. You can reuse your potions whenever you die and respawn should you die, or rather should this be the case, definitely make use of that. Overall, Antorus is definitely our strongest raid in Legion, and currently, next to an Affliction Warlock, the Shadow Priest is arguably the strongest class in this raid due to how perfectly adjusted most of the fights, except for Imonar the Soulhunter, are for our spec. You should find yourself doing a lot of damage this tier, and hopefully these tips will help you to increase it even further. Should you have any tips that I haven't mentioned yourself, be sure to let us all know in the comments below so that we can all improve. If this video did help you out, a like would of course be greatly appreciated, and be sure to subscribe in order to stay updated on my content, should you not have already. Now, as always my friends, have a good one, and I will see you all in the next one.
Lifetime in repeat.